So the value proposition then, you'll learn faster. So my argument is that if we can prove that one way of learning is objectively better than another way of learning, if we remove the idea of historical baggage and we were just making it with all the knowledge we have today, then you will learn faster with the system that's most efficient. And then the question is, well, then the question is, well, is that speed worthwhile? Does it outweigh the translation issues and the bridging kind of issues? So your understanding will be more transferable across the fretboard. So my argument would be that some of the conventions that have been put in place take on, like, there's implicit assumptions the way things are constructed. One of them being the major scale and minor scale are superior to the other modes, for example, or that the C major is superior to other scales also and whatnot. These are assumptions that I don't think you would make in a normal context. It's all the same, right? And if you learn it without those assumptions, it's like if you were to learn something very simply mathematically and you learn a trick that works, but it doesn't work across the board, right? You're actually blocking yourself later because you're implanting things that aren't exactly right that you'll have to unlearn later. So I'd rather learn things properly from the start, and then even though you have to translate it possibly to conventions that are making assumptions that I think are kind of incorrect but are inside of the language, that's better, right? You'll be able to go further, have a better understanding, and learn it faster. So you'll build your knowledge on a logically consistent, performance-oriented model, even if it diverges from traditional theory. So my goal is to open up the fretboard as fast as possible in as efficient as way as possible, in a way that is scalable as possible, removing as many hurdles as we can as well, not learning things that are incorrect. Even if that is going to contradict with the way some of the music theory is listed, because they have implicit assumptions just in the way things are written down, right? So we want to recognize that those implicit assumptions are there, and some of them are kind of are going to lead us to think incorrectly, in my opinion. So along the way, you'll gain a deeper appreciation for how and why music theory are originally built. So we'll look at some history in terms of how it was put together in order to then put together what might be a more efficient system if we had everything we knew today, while still developing tools to reframe it. All right, I want to make a quick look on the piano, because although, again, I'm a guitar player, so I'm going to use the guitar as my example, but I used to think that maybe this is just because the guitar is different than the piano, but no, I don't think that's the case. So I want to take a quick look at the piano and just realize that the piano, like a guitar, has multiple strings that are laid out similar to like one layer on the piano. So the guitar has a grid of kind of like the same layout that you have on a piano, except that the guitar doesn't have different shaped keys, whereas the piano is not symmetrical. So you've got these different key shapes within it. So that means the piano's a little bit easier for me to mentally shift through different scale shapes, right? Because it's all linear. It's going from left to right. And so it might be a little bit easier for me to jump in my mind saying, okay, now I'm in this mode, and now I'm going to C major scale to the Dorian scale or whatever, and renumber the system. But it still takes a lot more work to do that. So in other words, if we are in the key of C major and diatonically the same modes, those are all the white keys. So if you're playing all the white keys, it's pretty obvious that if I go from one scale to another scale, but I'm still playing all the white keys, that they're still kind of related. But I would still argue that mentally you're thinking, why am I renumbering the system? Because I'm playing the same set of notes, the same set of 7 notes that are being repeated out of basically 12. It would be more logical to me to say I'm looking at different center points as my tonic and moving basically the center point around those notes would be easier to see. Now again, that becomes a lot more important on the guitar because that mental gymnastics becomes multiplied by 5, because you have multiple different strings that you're dealing with on the guitar, but the same concept applies here as well. Now, what's different so that means on the guitar, we argued that one master shape will give us all 12 different shapes if we move through the different notes, as well as all the different modal shapes, because there's 7 modes per master shape that we're just going to renumber by node. On the piano, notice that still works within the shape. So if I move from C major to D Dorian or whatever, then I still have all the same concept moving through the same nodes. But on the piano, I actually have to learn a slightly different shape when I go from like C major to D major and related modes. Why? Because the black keys, the same formula applies, but the black keys are a different shape. Therefore, just structurally, the way your hand plays, it's going to look different to you. You can't copy and paste. So that means that you still have to learn 12 different scales in general, but it's not 12 times 7 different scales, right? Which is what you would think modally. What you would just think, I would think on a piano, I would think of it as I'm learning 12 different scale shapes that are different because of the interplay between the black keys, and within each of those shapes I have nodal points, the modal nodes, 7 different basic tonic points within those shapes. That's how I'd kind of think of it on the piano. But again, I learned a little bit. I haven't learned basically any piano. I've learned almost exclusively on the guitar, so that's where my point of focus will be. But I do think the concepts apply to the piano.